Hi, everyone. Welcome to the National Academy of Sciences, and welcome to our DASER. I'm J.D. Tolosik. I'm the Director of Cultural Programs here at the National Academy of Sciences, and I'd like to welcome our veteran DASER attendees, as well as anybody here who is a newcomer. For those of you who this is your first time at DASER, or DC Art Science Evening Rendezvous, is an ongoing series of discussions presented with the intent of fostering cross-disciplinary dialogue, as well as providing creative practitioners in all fields an opportunity for networking and discussion. This year marks our 14th year of hosting DASER, which we started back in 2011. So thank you all for making this a part of an ongoing ritual for us. DASER is part of the LASER network of Leonardo, the International Society of Art, Science, and Technology, which fosters over 50 similar groups around the world. We are part of a growing number of practitioners who are interested in fostering more dialogue like this. And tonight we're also welcome a community collaborator, the AIM Health Institute. AIM, which stands for Access to Integrative Medicine, is a local nonprofit that provides integrative medicine to low-income and terminally ill patients, regardless of their ability to pay. So we're so grateful to have AIM as a collaborator tonight. So the spirit of DASER, and in fact the mission of cultural programs here at the National Academy of Sciences, is to explore the intersections of art, science, and culture, thinking about impact and possible trajectories of new ideas and connections. So our regulars might notice a little bit of a change from what we normally do with DASERs. We will, of course, hear perspectives across the domains of art and science and health, but we also have several experiences throughout the evening. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more immersive, but we're so glad that you're here, and please participate as you feel comfortable. As our topic tonight is art, science, and the culture of health, I'll ask you to think about how you learn to manage stress, maybe through your life, or trauma, or anxiety. Let me just ask you, who experiences stress on any level? And those of you who don't have your hands up, I envy you. The second question to that is, how many of you feel like you have proper tools or sufficient tools to help you manage stress and anxiety? So that's kind of what we're kind of getting to. I'd like to just ask you to kind of hold in your mind, where did you learn those tools? Is it from family? Is it from maybe a religious or cultural background? Just as we're talking about stress or anxieties or trauma, just kind of hold that in your mind as we hear these wonderful talks today. So I have three wonderful friends here on stage today. Their bios are in your program, so I'm not going to read those to you, but I do want to introduce them to you just briefly. And it's so hard to talk about people just by their titles or labels. We have a doctor, we have a nurse, we have a performing artist, but those are accurate words, but they're not complete. Right? So just want to honor that as we kind of go through this. Misha Kogan is the Chief Medical Officer of George Washington University Center for Integrative Medicine, and he is the founding director of the AIM Health Institute. Also, we have Moira McGuire, who is a retired U.S. Public Health Service nurse officer and an integrative wellness expert. Now again, keep in mind, these are not complete descriptions. They're accurate, but I think as we go through the evening, you're going to know that. And we have back with us the National Academy of Sciences Performing Artist in Residence, Fred Johnson. Fred is a community engagement specialist at the David A. Straz Center for the Performing Arts in Tampa, Florida. So welcome to all of my friends and my colleagues. That's good. So Misha, can we start with you? I think we want to hear what you're doing, but also I think you wanted to get us started in a different way.
Can you hear me okay? Good. Well, welcome. I'm excited to be here. I'm bringing, I wouldn't say a medical aspect. I think I'm bringing what I call health, right? We are in the midst of pretty obvious medical health crisis in this country, and I think we are led to believe that our healthcare system is supposed to keep us healthy. We don't have a healthcare system, we have an ill management system. And today, I hope that what I will share with you is a little bit of a personal journey to health. Those of you who interested in longevity or healthy lifespan may have seen recent Peter Attia 60 Minutes, and he described the healthy lifespan. And I was listening intently to the whole presentation, and I realized that we're still, despite moving towards health and a lot of the aspects of our society going towards the health, we're still stuck in a significantly over-medicalized part, where we think that we can rely on our healthcare system to keep us healthy. So I think the taste today is going to be to say, I think health comes from within. It comes from finding, redefining, and continuously striving to optimize your balance in life. And the balance comes from a variety of places. I've been practicing Sufism for 20 plus years, and I'll share with you a little bit how Sufis see the balance and how they can help us with 1,000 years of experience of different practices. So, but before we do that, I'd like to start us out with a poem and then an invocation. So I didn't grow up spiritual or religious, actually. I grew up in Russia in a completely atheist household and came to belief system later in life. And so I'll never question anybody's belief systems, but what I want to share with you is the way I see it for myself and how I incorporate it into my own health and into my own balance. So this poem called Guest House, I'm sure many of you have heard about it. It's a great way to open because it opens and welcomes everything, every experience we have. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweeps your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And traditionally, before we do any practice, any breathing practice, which we will do next, we do an invocation. So this is a healing invocation from our lineage. I'm going to read you so I don't screw it up. We begin in the name of the One, whose body is the whole of the cosmos and our own bodies, whose life flows through our breath, whose thought informs our thinking, whose light radiates through our glands and our hearts. We begin in the name of the One, whose presence is always here. We honor the Mother, our Earth, who has provided sustenance to us throughout the time, her vital air, her living soul, her creatures. We honor the caretakers who have tended all of life on earth for thousands of years. Let's place our feet on this sacred ground and settle in, giving thanks to those who have come before us. Toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. So settle in, keep your back straight, close your eyes. You can keep them open if you're not comfortable closing, but this practice goes better with the closed eyes. And this is a purification breath. Sometimes we call it elemental breath. It's a cornerstone practice. And the practice centered around elements, balancing each element within our own system, Unfortunately, we live at times where being in the nature is a privilege, being in balance with every element around is a privilege. So this next 10 minutes that we'll take for the practice, I consider a privilege. So we're starting with the earth breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Imagine that your feet are connected through the floor into the earth. And we're going to inhale through the nose and exhale through the nose. And we're going to imagine that with each breath, our body stress evaporates. If there are any particular part of your body that feels tense, I invite you to relax it if you can, or just pay attention. The body speaks with us constantly. Paying attention to this language is first step toward finding the balance. When we exchange the energy with the earth, there is an actual concrete component of electricity. This idea of earthing or walking on the earth barefoot. We can't do this now, obviously, but we can imagine that the earth energy grounds us, purifies our physical body, our muscles, our bones. When you're taking an exhale, see if you can release any tension that you're holding. Imagine that it melts and goes back into the earth. And then when you inhale the sense of being grounded, the sense of being nurtured by our motherland, Mother Earth. Let's take one more earth breath. And we're going to move to the water. We're going to inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And we're going to imagine being placed into the body of water of your choosing. Maybe it's your favorite ocean. Maybe it's your shower. Just imagine that clean water runs all around you and through you, purifying all of our cells, all of our spaces between the cells. We tend to forget that our body is 60% water. So not only do we need to remember that, so we're constantly hydrating, and also it's important to remember that the purity of water is always within us. Also, water element has a profound depthness. Imagine the ocean. The surface is always moving, the waves, the wind, but the depth of the ocean is always stays still. So you can connect to that sensation and realize that no matter what stressors are in our life, no matter how jitterness comes, there is a part of us that is always completely still and also completely healthy. So spending just a couple of minutes every day connecting to that part is of a substantial importance. Let's take one more water breath. And we transition to the fire. Inhale through the mouth. Exhale through the nose. Center your breath in the middle of your chest. Imagine that the heart, the physical heart, that constantly generates the flow of blood, is the center of our fire. You can connect it to the sun. You can connect it to a fire. Maybe you have a favorite fireplace in your house. Imagine being right next to it, being nourished by the warmth. Here we turn our attention to our emotional state. And we can pay attention to any emotions that are really not serving us well. And anger, frustration. And I want to turn to fear. I think there's a lot of fear of late. So we can inhale, bring the energy of the fire into this emotion, and then with exhale, release it. Realizing that emotions are not us. They come and go. We can and we should release any negative impressions. Even if we do this just for a few minutes a day, this balancing act is the part of the practice of finding the balance. If you're a visual person, you can imagine when you exhale that the ashes of the fire of your burned negative emotions are being exhaled. And let's not forget the body. So let's check in maybe with the forehead, with the lower jaw. See if there's any area in your body that still holds tension. We'll take one more fire breath. And we'll shift to the air. Inhale and exhale through the mouth. The breath becomes gentle, light, just like air itself. And here we turn our attention to the mental plane, to our thoughts. And similar to emotions, let's see if we can identify any of our thoughts or thinking patterns that are really not serving us well. Maybe they related to the stressors in a day. Maybe they are some self-critique or self-doubt or fearful thoughts. Just imagine that you're a little kid laying in the grass and you look up and there are the clouds of your thoughts. They just come and go. We don't have to attach ourselves to them. They're just passing creatures, and we are the observers. If we do attach our being to them, then they become us. They are important, that they are given to us, but we can choose what to do with them. And we can choose to release them. We can choose to move from the negative thoughts to positive ones. And we can also stay in this depthness of stillness, despite the surface of the thinking being crowded with all kinds of jitterness. Let's take one more air breath. And here we transition to the ether. And ether is an element that collects all other elements, and it's the element that purifies our relationship with greater. And here, the greater means something very personal. Maybe it's a nature, maybe it's a community, maybe it's God. This is your personal greater. And so with each breath, and you can inhale and exhale through the nose or through the nose and mouth together. And here, with each breath, we purifying the connection. We imagining that we are part of the greater, that we're always connected. Sufis say that the God is as close as our own jugular vein. And so remembering this helps us to be aware that ultimately, no matter how separate we feel, we are part of the greater. And then gently come back. If you have your eyes closed, open them up. And I'll pass back to JD.
Thank you, Misha. I'm so relaxed. This is the most relaxed I've ever been as a moderator, so I appreciate you being here. I think it's so wonderful to be able to, we come to this space and we talk about art, science, and culture, but to actually be here in the moment and to be led through something like that by a physician who understands the complexity of mind and emotion and the body. Moira, it's kind of hard to come out of that, and we'll give you a moment.
I've lost all of my
So this is going to be just kind of starting up, but Moira, I sort of introduced you very simply as a nurse, and I know the complexity that is Moira as an artist, as a human being. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your many different skills and abilities that you bring to healthcare.
I would love to. I actually started out as, and still am, the daughter of a Marine opera singer and father, and a mother who's a painter and a pianist and a playwright. So our entire lives growing up were immersed in the arts. My dad would teach at home Saturday morning, so we would wake up to someone singing Musetta's Waltz in our living room, and we'd go to painting class with my mom, and she'd play her guitar, to sing us to sleep at night. All of the artwork in our house was my mother's paintings, and it was beautiful. And I thought I was going to be a Broadway singer and dancer, but life had other plans, so I went into nursing. And I think that was, I had a very traditional nursing training and education. Definitely, as Misha mentioned, the medical kind of illness model, right, where your professional prowess is really based on your ability to identify illness and injury and pathology and so, my first 11 years was in inpatient psych. I then went on to oncology. I did warrior care for 4 years, and it wasn't until I, at Walter Reed, became the chief of integrative health and wellness that I really started to, first of all, welcome the change, because all of those fields were things that I would love to, at some point, be out of business, right? No one wants to do those things. But like that opportunity to take off my illness lenses and put on my wellness lenses was just life-altering. I will also say that, I am the mother of 6 children, and I greatly appreciate that front row seat to human growth and development, and I think whatever I was experiencing clinically was absolutely reinforced, in the house, watching my children grow and become the amazing human beings they are, by the way, not because of me, because they're just amazing from the beginning, as we all are, by the way. And so, it took a little time to switch. I will say one of the things that helped immensely was that at Walter Reed, Integrative Health and Wellness, which is a one of its kind within the military health system, they don't have a bunch of them, there's one, was actually embedded in primary care, in internal medicine. So I'm running a wellness program with health psychologists and dietitians and health educators and mind body, practitioners, doing acupuncture, and I'm also a sexuality counselor, so I saw patients for that. All of that within this illness model. And so it really, like, you start to develop these, muscles that you didn't realize, but again, once those lenses are changed for you, it's a beautiful thing. It's definitely a struggle, and as an example, a number of years ago, there was a lot of interest in, again, the experience of overweight and obesity, not just in the general population, but within a military population as well. And you think to yourself, this is so strange, because this system is designed to ensure that people are, not overweight, that they're not experiencing obesity. So there's something going on here. By the way, they like to make it about the individual. I don't know about that. Anyway, so there was a lot of discussion about, well, we need an obesity pathway. And I said, okay. But again, obesity is an illness term, right? There are lots of people who have to address weight management issues, and it's not always about being overweight. Sometimes it's underweight. But again, nurses, physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, they're all, they go through this factory that makes them want to see the illness model. I've stopped, but for a long time I used to, not intentionally, but I would just run across advertisements for health fairs. And I'd be like, okay, this is interesting, let me see what they're offering. Okay, blood pressure screening, blood glucose monitoring, so on and so forth. And I would think, this is not a health fair, this is an illness fair. Because if it's a health fair, then you do have, like, your exercise physiologists, you have your dietitians, right? Like, the most important health activities that we engage in, besides being creative, are attached to what we put in our mouths, how we move, what we think about, how we feel. Like, that's a health fair. Anything other than that is just, physicians and other people coming and, making people feel like they're interested in their health. And so it was definitely, a challenge to get people. What we found actually was, people who could advocate for themselves or who had really learned that their health belonged to them were the most successful, right? Because that's another message that's often communicated, that your health, by the way, doesn't belong to you. It belongs to somebody else who's here in this clinic, in this hospital, in this healthcare system. They'll tell you what you need to do, how much you need, when and where, and so on and so forth. And so the thing that I love about the wellness model is that it's really, like, when you come, the very first thing, right, that wellness practitioners and people who are interested in your wellness are going to ask is, what are your strengths, right? What are you doing well? That's not necessarily what you hear from a healthcare provider, right? They're more interested in, well, what's wrong? What's your chief complaint? Why did you come here today? But your wellness provider is very interested in, what are you already doing really, really well? Because we're going to build on that, right? And we're going to take those perhaps feelings of self-doubt. People are absolutely often filled with this idea that they don't own their health because they don't feel confident to manage it, to make decisions. And, it's lovely to do it in partnership, right, with people who've received training, but that's not always the message. So, as a matter of fact, the VA, quite a number of years ago, and Fred and I have talked about this before, the VA had a massive kind of marketing campaign through their Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation. And they decided that they were going to change their question when you come to see their provider. Instead of asking, what's the matter with you? They're going to ask, what matters to you? And I think, oh my gosh, that was so beautiful and so inspirational. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just changing a few words, changing a few things, reminding people, what's actually, like, whatever you need, you already have. By the way, we didn't plan this, but I also came with one of my favorite poems by Jalaluddin Rumi, and it is, let me pull it up. I love this poem. He says, "Don't go off sightseeing. The real journey is right here. The great excursion starts from exactly where you are. You are the world. You have everything you need. You are the secret. You are the wide opened. Don't look for the remedy for your troubles outside yourself. You are the medicine. You are the cure for your own sorrow." Like, that's such a beautiful, powerful thing. And, you know, we would find when patients came to see our mind-body practitioners, who mostly worked, you know, they did some yoga, but they did a lot of breath work, like, you know, Misha did for us today, which was so awesome. It would take people a long time to kind of quiet their mind, to be able to just focus on their breath. And there were so many things you said that I loved, particularly about balance, right? Because health is really about the presence of balance, and whatever that is. And one area of balance I think that's often missed is the balance between like input and output, right? And we've all become overwhelmed with input. I mean, we're taking things in constantly, and we really need opportunities to be creative and to self-express, right? Or we will be out of balance. And I feel as though as a society, we are not emphasizing and supporting creativity and self-expression as the healthy behavior it is, right? When we should think about it and operationalize it the same way we do eating nutritious food, and exercising and brushing our teeth. These are all the same things. And so, you know, with practice and time, people can learn to get out of their heads and into their bodies and find it a place of comfort and respite, right? Because in your mind, you can think about, you know, the future, you can think about the past, you can be all over the place in your mind, but when you're in your body, like, it's really just about the present. And it's such a restful and powerful place to be that you own. You don't need anybody else to take you there. You can go there whenever you want. And by the way, when you're there, you also not only encounter your breath, but you encounter your heart, right? Which is actually the very first. Cardiac tissue moving is the very first sign of life. And it's interesting because I also come from a spiritual and religious background in Islam. And in Islam, the idea of acquiring information and knowledge is something that goes on in the brain. But wisdom, understanding, seeking guidance for, you know, how you should proceed in life, that all resides in the heart, right? And when people pray, right, as they lower their head, what happens to the heart? It's actually above the head. Right? So every single time you're lowering your head, you're elevating your heart. You're reminded, like, we can't be wise people if we're not compassionate, if we're not kind, if we're not gentle, if we're not patient. So, and I have to tell you, my heart never beats more joyfully than when I'm in the presence of Fred Johnson. So I'm going to pass it to Fred.
Thank you, Bob.
Anyone here love music? Oh. Anybody here love to dance? Anybody here love to look at artwork and go to the museum? Anybody here sing in the shower? So these are all wellness experiences, my friends. These are all wellness experiences that really dance on the ether of what both Moira and Misha have shared. So I invite you to remember or to reawaken to the fact that your amazing voice is magnificent and a healing element for you. Okay? Now, some might say that a melody is a beautiful, beautiful thing, not just to hear, but to feel it. I singing to you this melody on the breath. It touches your ears, and I hope it touches your heart. But your beautiful voice is so healing. So I invite you to join me. Let's do a little call and response. Are you ready? Yes. La 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 la. Whoa. Now you're just a little behind the beat. Ma 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 ma. Your beautiful voice, just the pure vibration of your voice has just awakened your vagus nerve and sent a pure vibration through you that awakened the natural medicines of your body, created nitric oxide, which is healthy to the heart, just from the pure vibration of your voice. So our voices are incredible vehicles for us finding a sense of wholeness and completeness. Have you ever been in a situation in your life where like someone said something to you that was like phenomenal and all you just went, Did you ever do that? You ever somebody say something to you and like, you were a little unsure about it and you went, right? Or you see something that's magnificent and you go, whoa, right? Or you have a bellyache and it hurts so bad until you just roll up in a ball and go, oh, yeah, right? See, the body has a need, it has a desire for sound and motion. My reality is in the first 5.5 years of my life, and those developmental years of my life from 0 to 4, I was a ward of the state in the state of New Jersey. So I was like from foster home to foster home and in orphanages. So I didn't have that natural connection every day of someone holding me and rocking me and singing to me. So what creation gave me was the call to do that myself. So as a little guy, I would sit and make sounds, and I would go, and I would rock back and forward, because my body needed to feel the motion and the sound of my own voice. So the way that I found solace was to move my body and to make sound within me. And this is how I found the sense of okay. This is how I understood that I'd be all right. And if there was a challenge or if it was cold, I'd rock faster, 'cause my body needed it. And I'd hum deep within me. Now I get paid thousands of dollars to sit and sing. But without that original call, that call for me to recognize that the pure vibration of my own voice and the motion of my own body was my way of finding a sense of being okay, a sense of comfort. And it evolved, and I think a lot of what I understand now, I wouldn't understand had I not had that experience so long ago. This is true for all of us. What Moira and Misha have talked about in terms of, being co-therapists in every moment of our lives. What do we imagine? How do we speak? The pure vibration of how we speak to ourselves. I'll ask you this question. You don't have to answer it out loud. But how do you speak to you about you? Do you speak lovingly to you? Do you embrace you? Watch, do this. Put your hands on your chest. Say, ha, go. Ha. You feel your chest vibrate? Feel that? Put your hands over the bridge of your nose and go, Feel that vibration? Put your hand here on your throat. Ah. You feel that vibration? And put your hand on top of your head, and it'll work whether you have a turban or not, and say, yee. Feel that vibration? Every sound that we create vibrates inside of us before it goes out into the world. So, that old ancient philosophy that says, as you speak, so you are. The pure vibration of our own voice is not only that, collectively, it has an impact on the communal energy of our being together. I say that, that's why the world is so crazy now. We're not feeling that inner vibration, that connectedness. Your breath, your voice, your heartbeat. Imagine. Creation says, hey, it's time for you to come into the world. And so two here in the world come together and create that pathway for you. And as you come into the world, right, your way of announcing your beingness is the heartbeat, is your own heartbeat. And you lie there within the beautiful space of your mother, and you entrain to the rhythm and the heartbeat of your mother. All of the drum traditions of the world are based upon the mother's heartbeat. And so there for 9 months, you're there, and your heart is beating, your mother's heart is beating, you're preparing and, getting ready to come into the world. You come into the birth canal, you come through the birth canal, and the first song you sing is, and then you cry. And that song of the breath, breathing in and breathing out, is the beautiful melody that we sing in every moment. And that connection to enhancing our health and well-being is in that frequency and vibration of how we speak, how we move through the world, how we discover the world. So in our journey of learning and knowing and understanding the science of those chemicals, the science of the neurological system, the science, the inward science of our being, coupled with our connection, our embrace of the beauty of the song of the breath and our beating heart, and our ability to see, open our eyes and see the beauty of the world, and dream and imagine, so that we recognize that there's an inner garden journey. That song of the breath and the beating heart, those two melodies that are in harmony with each other until we transition from this life's journey, is an important part of the journey. So when you have those moments where you're feeling a little bit out of balance, give yourself permission to take a breath and know that the pure vibration of your own voice helps to awaken and enhance your ability to move towards balance, to connect to your breath, to connect to the heartbeat, to know scientifically that superhighway of the vagus nerve feels the pure vibration of your voice and helps to move you into a place of balance. know and love and embrace your breath, your beating heart, the imagery, that which you think, that which you speak. The vibration of that is so powerful and is enable, and sing and dance. Sing and dance. Feel the motion and movement of your, I just had a hip replaced. I'm dancing again, Jack, I'm rocking, right? Feel that and know that you're a part of the journey, right? Everybody say, I am a beautiful melody within me. My voice, my breath, my heart is a beautiful song. Awo hina, awo hina. So the tone of ah resonates in the heart. Woe resonates in the eyes, and here in the face and in your cranium. We resonates here in the crown. Na resonates throughout the body. It's an old medicine chant taught to me by one of my teachers. Awohina, the medicine song. Awohina sings inside of me. Awohina resonates within, connected to my beating heart. Sing Awohina. 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 A beautiful song of the heart. Sing a beautiful song of the heart. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. This time when you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, just gently say the tone, ah. Here we go. Ah. You feel that? It's a wellness thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. You know, one of the things that Fred has done, and actually one of the ways that I came to know Fred was with his work through Creative Forces with the National Endowment for the Arts, which is working with post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma with soldiers. And so I think you can kind of imagine how effective that type of engagement might be. I got to tell you, the most beautiful thing I just heard was you guys singing back.
Yeah.
And that just has me really very moved. One of the most beautiful things that I've experienced in this space, and there's been some magnificent things happening. So thank you, Fred, for taking us through that. Those of you who have come to the DASERs, you know that we're very interested in talking about how art and science inform each other. And I think one reason, why we have been engaging with Fred over the past several years, there's been a lot of research, a lot of money from NIH a few years ago put into sound and health research and kind of looking at these intersections. And from my perspective, as somebody who's kind of looking at this intersection, the health and art and culture conversation is having a great deal of impact, and I'm hearing a lot of these conversations. So I just kind of wonder if we could kind of talk a little bit about where you see this has changed. You know, where is this conversation? You know, for maybe, you know, I know all of you are kind of in these spaces. I was just in New Jersey with Fred a couple of weeks ago, building a healthy community gathering. So there's a lot of a conference. I'd like to kind of maybe just get you to share with our audience where those conversations are.
I mean, I think from an artistic standpoint of view, that one of the beautiful things that I'm beginning to see and experience is the fact that, you know, the marriage or the connection between creativity and science and health and healing. If you look at the most ancient of cultures, I mean, there was not a word for art because it was an integral part of how the community knew to be. The community sang together, the community danced together, the community, you know, there were oral traditions where story was told so that the imagination was cultivated. Food was an important part of that. And, you know, when the community had someone who needed a healing, everyone participated in that. And so what I'm seeing happen now is a shared conversation between the science and research community and the art or the cultural community, because, you know, the reality we're coming to realize or to acknowledge or quantify is that all forms of creativity are an important part of cultivating health and wellness for the mind, the body, the spirit, for the individual and for the community. So to really sort of merge and come together and in gatherings like this, and to be able to have both sort of the knowledge and the understanding of what's happening medically, what's happening scientifically, and to amplify the importance of creativity, because in so many instances over the last few years, art and things of that nature have been de-emphasized, taken out of school programs and things of that nature. So to recognize that as a people, a part of the beauty of the human experience is to create together. You know, if you want to take a look at the richness of a culture, you look at their artifacts, you look at their buildings, you look at their artwork, you understand what's happening within us. And so this merger, if you will, of science, research, the medical community, and the creative, the arts community, sharing and learning from each other and creating sort of a formal marriage to move together into the community to say, this is how we can together regain a sense of the wholeness of what it is to be human, and this is how we can understand what's happening within us so that we can have a positive effect upon how we are with each other in healthy ways of mind, body, and spirit. So it's great to have these two worlds come together in a common conversation.
Yeah, I will say that you know, we're towards the tail end of what is being called the season of arts and health. So the UN General Assembly, you know, had a co-occurring event, the Healing Arts Week, out of NYU. Creating Healthy Communities just took place at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. And then the National Organization for Arts and Health has its annual conference next week. There's so much momentum being built around this. The Delaware Arts Council just had an art summit on Monday. They had 2 workshops, the cross-sector of arts and health. The National Assembly of State Arts Agencies actually implemented an arts and health professional learning community earlier this year. So there's a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement. Yeah, and so, you know, we're very optimistic. I think, as Fred pointed out, these are ancient practices, so there's nothing new here. But what I'm seeing as some of the drivers are around social prescribing, right? This idea that when you
Dig a little bit more into that. What is social prescribing?
Yes.
Okay.
So the idea that when you go to see your provider, so, you know, I go to see Dr. Kogan, and I express some concerns about low back pain. And here's a perfect example. Like a decade ago, low back pain had a lot of clinical interventions, none of which were yoga. Yoga is now the first
Because none worked.
Right, right. So now when you know, I come in and say, listen, I got some low back pain, I'm kind of feeling, I don't know, a little lonely, then you would say, oh, how about yoga? And how about taking a pottery class? Or how about going to a ballroom dancing class? Or how about just going to the symphony? And that these would actually be prescribed by your provider. And at some point, hopefully in the future, like Medicare, Medicaid, all the insurance companies would be paying for these, understanding that they are, I know.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh.
I'm a little
It's
bit
coming.
of a Pollyanna. But understanding the important role of prevention here, right? And so this is the idea of social prescribing, and it is being piloted quite successfully in some areas. Massachusetts has a phenomenal program, New Jersey. A lot of other states are working on putting the pieces together. The other force that we're seeing is around creative aging. Again, as our population, present company included, is getting older and older, right? The idea of how we are using, creative practices, not just to address health outcomes, but to address the well-being and the connectedness of people as they age. And then, of course, your veterans and the arts initiatives. Those are kind of like the three main areas that are moving forward. But, we had mentioned this, Dr. Kogan and Fred had done a webinar recently and, brought up the fact that Wayne Jonas, who's a, retired, military physician who, started the World Health Organization. And
He was the first director of the National Center for
Complementary and Alternative Medicine, which is now the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, because they understood language is really powerful. He has a book called How Healing Works, and it's very clear. Studies have consistently shown that whatever intervention the healthcare and medical community is going to provide to you, it accounts for 30% of what happens in terms of your healing, your well-being, your wellness, your health, all of the above. So we're investing a lot of time and energy in the 30%. I don't want to discount it, but there's this huge 70% that we all personally own, and we should be working on. So there's a lot of exciting work going on, I think, within arts and health.
So the one thing that I probably didn't share as much as I should have, one of Misha's areas of specialization is aging, longevity, and end-of-life care. And so, within you have things like chronic pain, you have the trauma and things like this. So I wonder, from your standpoint, how do you see where we are with this?
So from my perspective, one of the most exciting things we're seeing is not necessarily a movement inside the medical establishment, but it's movement of trying to integrate all of these things directly into brand new models. So the current, most of our models, and this is why the healthcare is so expensive, is a fee for service, right? So you go to your doctor and you seeing a doctor, and doctor gonna submit the bill to the Medicare. Within that model, I can't prescribe yoga to be covered by the Medicare, but what we can do, we can say, okay, instead of this model, which is, by the way, old and highly ineffective and inefficient, we could say, well, how about instead you give X amount of dollars per person to try to optimize the health. And in there, you start creating innovative models. And we have them. We have a very innovative model in University of Vermont that's showed 70% reduction in admissions to emergency room, 50% reduction in opioid use, and this is a chronic pain model. And half of what they do is group yoga. I don't know if they do singing, but I presume they do. But when we create this model here, we will be singing. And maybe in another community, they won't be singing. Maybe they'll be dancing. I think a lot of this health is built in, but we have no infrastructure within the reimbursement model. That's what has to be changed. So when you said, that's a honey on my wound, when you said that Medicare, Medicaid has to cover it, it does. I mean, if we seeing that this models in a pilot program saves society large amount of money delivering better care. Why are we not covering them? So there are emergence of models. AIM is trying to work with one of those models through some of the DC grants. And I think it's going to spread. There's an academic consortium of integrative health centers in the country that kind of spearheads this program called WITS. It's an idea that we're going to basically take different centers in the country, do those pilots, compile the data, and then present it to the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in a global push to say, at least with chronic pain, we have to do better. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the chronic pain model completely failed, that there's actually no effective pain management that's universally effective. And because of that, the cost of care for the pain has been escalating. Actually, cost of any chronic disease has been escalating. And you can imagine with the society getting older that cost is just running away from us. In fact, one of the scariest things, and I'm not going to try to scare you, but since you asked.
Blame me, okay.
Yeah, so who's familiar with the concept of polypharmacy here? All right. So if you go back 2-3 decades ago, the polypharmacy, by the way, defined as taking 5 medications or more, and hyperpolypharmacy defined taking 10 medications or more. If we go back 20 years ago, this was a non-existent problem. Today, 42% of people over 65 take 5 medications, 10% take 10. If we don't change this, in 50 years, 90% of 20-year-olds will be taking at least 1 pill, okay? 100% of 65-year-old will be taking 5 pills or more. Now, of course, it has to give, right? It has to change because it's completely unsustainable because the care as usual now kills about 250,000 Americans. Just because the cost of what we do, just that medications have side effects. I don't know, maybe Fred's voice have side effects, but I'm yet to discover it. The reality is we carry profound amount of wisdom in our own bodies. Oh. And, you know, we have to start investing in the 70% of the field where the health comes from. We're investing in 30% where the disease management comes in, and that's all we do. And I'm not trying to negate use of medications, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that's all we do. We have to stop that. We have to start adding component of health to it. So it really has to be a healthcare system, not the disease management system. Until we change reimbursement and until we align the reimbursement model with the health, we're going to keep getting sicker. My prediction is we're going to keep getting sicker for a while. But there is a movement. I think at least in large academic centers, we're seeing some gradual shift. Do I like the speed of that shift? No. But it's there. It's happening.
And I think from a wellness standpoint of view, that's why it's so important for us to revisit what can I personally do every day in my life, especially when we're talking about stress and trauma. I have lots of people that, you know, I engage with, and their question to me is, what can I say? What can I say and what can I personally do to help myself when I find myself in a situation where I'm just sort of overrun by life and what's going on? You know, it's like it's important to be reminded to be still. It's important to recognize that things have an impact upon us to the degree that we hold on to them. That's why the simple thing of recognizing, listening to the still, beautiful voice of your own breath, or really beginning to recognize and realize that stillness and centering and being quiet or listening within yourself is a really, really important thing. How can we individually participate in that wellness journey so that then in partnership, when we do have to go in for care, we recognize we're just not giving over ourselves, you know? And if that is turning on a piece of music that just settles you, it's an important thing. What can I do personally? Is it going out and taking a walk for 5 minutes to be in nature? We have this beautiful reality that exists around us, and we lock into challenges. I had a conversation with Misha that said there's a significant number of people that he comes in contact with where it's almost a matter of an individual's sort of spirit being broken. How do I awaken an inner sense of hope? How do I listen to and connect to those things that I can do personally, along with exercising, along with nutrition? Recognizing that the frequency, the energy of conversations that are around us, be away from those things that don't serve you. Still them with the sound of your own breath. It's a co-participation journey to be able to work together.
I want to throw this open to questions from the audience. We have 2 microphones on either side of the auditorium, and we are kind of recording this. So if you have a question you'd like to ask the panel or comments, we'd love to hear it. And let's start right here.
Hear me?
Yep.
Okay. You've kind of danced around it a little bit. I know that the gentleman on the right mentioned, mind, body, and spirit. And we've had discussion of, this is not new. A lot of this is ancient. And then Misha mentioned, and he started us off with, some meditation and bringing us. I'm just wondering, I do want to focus on the spiritual part of health. And I'm just wondering why there isn't more emphasis on that. And I'm not saying that we need to get a religious person in here, maybe, a theologian could add something to this. But for example, singing. I would think that, I enjoy singing myself. I sing in the shower all the time. But if I'm, or I sing in the car, some good Pavarotti or whatever. But I get a lot of fulfillment if I'm singing in a spiritual context. And to me that, from a physical perspective, that relieves stress. There's a lot of other things in there. It just seems that if there's and you mentioned some models, it just seems that the spiritual part of this is very much, and I don't know how you would introduce it or how you would introduce it to a model, but to dance around it is one way to deal with it, but to address it directly, or maybe even have it at a 4th component, and make it a quartet as opposed to a trio, that might add some more depth. So I'm saying the spiritual part of it might be something that benefits health, and there might be ways to focus on it. And I don't know what that answer is, but I just want to introduce it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think the way that I respond to that is spirituality means a different thing to a lot of people. Like, for instance, we've made mention of like, some of our spiritual practices. I didn't specifically. You know that the word spirituality comes from the Latin word spiritus, which means breath, to breathe. So there are many ways for us to breathe into whatever that spirit or that inner essence is, right? I mean, we have individual practices that we utilize. I could have turned everything that I did here into spiritual chant. So we don't specifically talk about a spiritual pathway, but whatever that means, absolutely. If there's an enhancement to your connection to scriptures, to poetry, to music, to a pathway, that's very, very important. Breathe into that so that the essence of spirituality is absolutely enhancing if that's what you choose. Some people's spirituality is walking along a river, is being in nature. So what we didn't do was focus on specificity, but absolutely, if there is a spiritual practice, right, a sort of sacred breath practice, if you will, absolutely do it. So it wasn't an attempt to dance around it. It was to kind of dance and include it, because it really is the breath of wholeness and oneness, however that feels and means to you. All right.
I will also say I am a person of faith, and I do believe in a creator. And I believe that, our creator made all of us unique for a reason, right? Like if we were all supposed to be the same, it certainly wouldn't be up to us to do that for our creator. So I don't know what everything looks like, beginning, middle, and end, but I do know that the key to our success is to be who we are meant to be uniquely. And in this world, I find it's sometimes very much a struggle for people to identify and honor who they are uniquely. But for me, that's something to always be celebrated.
I think part of the problem, we think that in our evidence-based model, the research is basically you have an intervention and you have a result. That works if you're looking at the car industry or an airplane, but it just doesn't work with us. I mean, we simply can't isolate certain things. Yes, it's nice with a drug, you do the placebo versus real drug, and how are you going to do that with spirituality? In fact, with acupuncture, you know, there's this model of sham acupuncture, placebo, which is quite not placebo. And so the moment you start venturing outside of a kind of a very single-minded medical industrial complex, you're realizing the research has to be broadened. It has to become all-inclusive, and we don't have model for that. So what I do see happening, particularly at level of certain, I wouldn't say it's not at a level of NIH, it's not at the level of largest granting organizations, or at the smaller level, but we are seeing pragmatic research where, and this is what we did at AIM, when we would take a group of patients and instead of saying, okay, you're gonna take this therapy or that therapy, we'll simply give them a package of therapies, a package of care that includes often spirituality or breath work or whatever, and then we see what happens. Now, of course, it becomes a different level of quality of evidence because we're not controlling things in there, we're simply observing. But it's still very valuable. Imagine if I did a research and I took 100 patients with chronic pain and I put them through Fred's voice singing, group yoga, tai chi, acupuncture, massage. If that package of care at the end of the day ended up being more effective and better for pain, and by the way, their quality of life improved, society has to honor that. It doesn't matter that the quality of that evidence is lower. It doesn't matter. And I do see that there's a shift. There's a gradual shift that's happening into direction of saying, okay, enough is enough, single treatments, they're gonna be there, fine. But we need to start creating these complex infrastructures of wellness around the medical problems.
Thank you. Fred, did you want to? Okay. Let's go over on this side, or I'm going to alternate back and forth. So over here.
I'm curious about practical advice. So I have hypothyroidism. And, you know, when I got diagnosed, I said, well, why is my thyroid all of a sudden unhappy? And the doctor was like, we don't know, just take this pill every day for the rest of your life and go away. And ultimately, after 8 years of taking that pill, my body stops responding. And I've keep firing my doctors, and I'm trying to find functional medicine practitioners and wellness. And now I'm like, have stopped just taking the medicine to see if I can get my thyroid to restart itself, because we don't allow the thyroid. Like if you get emotionally healthy and connect with spirituality, that pill never allows the thyroid to try and restart itself. And so how do you find a practitioner willing to work with you and get off that prescription? How do you know when your body is like on the right track, when you're trying to wean it off of that medicine and do the emotional healing work, do the breath work? How do you know where you are on that path? And where do we find people?
What a great question. And the reason you're struggling, again, is because within the system, we have a complete separation. We have holistic practitioners on one side and the standard of care. Holistic often is not covered, so people don't go there, right? Because they're trying to utilize healthcare insurance. And this disconnect has to get fixed. Imagine an endocrinologist can pick up a phone call and call yoga therapist and say, hey, you know, what do you think can be done here because the medicine is failing? I obviously cannot answer your question directly. I don't know. I mean, you'd need to become my patient, and we do have several functional medicine doctors in our practice. But in each case, there is some middle ground. And your problem is not unique. There are a lot of patients who will go through a standard of care and eventually start feeling, I'm not feeling well enough. This is not good enough. And then these questions start coming up. And I don't have an answer to you because the system doesn't exist. You have to create it for yourself. There has been, in the last couple of years, there's been an idea which is difficult to swallow. And the idea goes like this. Maybe we should completely forget the medical system and say we need to create a parallel health system. We need to create health insurance. We need to create people who are just going to support your wellness and not even go toward medicine, because right now there's a disconnect and it's too slow. Reconnecting it's too slow. And in fact, you look at some very large institutions, and it looks sometimes the divide is actually growing because mostly financial interests. What you're looking for is not making money, right? The pills do, procedures do, but not this. This is low cost. And in part because of that, it's difficult to put into the system.
Thank you. Let's go back over to this side.
Oops, sorry. So I have a question that is a little bit of a shift, if it's okay with you. My concern is not just the older generation, so I'm in the older generation group, but it's really as you said, right now we have a lot of young people who take one pill. A few years down the road, God knows how many pills. And you mentioned something about social influencers. So my son, for example, I try to encourage him to start meditation, to address his ADHD, to address all kinds of things, but it's not hip, right? You get the people who are, let's go buff, let's do this, let's do that, but how do we start at the young age to make this and start having influencers on TikTok and elsewhere? Because if you look at it, I mean, Ronaldo, who's a great soccer player, does Pilates. Weekend does TM, and so on. But how much of these facts are known to these young kids? And how do we start that journey with them so that 20, 30 years down the road, they're in a much better place than some of us here, and even where they are, to be honest.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, which I don't have the answer to, but I think one of the things that we try to do at the Performing Arts Center in Tampa, Florida, is begin to introduce, like for instance, one of the really powerful things is the power of story. And so we try to work with young people to talk about health and well-being and what does that look like, and how, so that young people can regain a sense of imagination, because they're getting so much from here so fast. I mean, it's a major challenge. For years, people have been saying, along with technology comes a huge responsibility to create a sense of balance, and it's out of balance. I mean, we're trying to introduce that at our Conservatory for the Arts, to begin to use theater to understand how the power of story, and then to recognize, like for instance, I'll teach young people about your breath and breathing and how that can support your ability to communicate. Like I'm elevating my voice now, and if I didn't have this microphone on, you'd still be able to hear. So, we talk about that, about breath and breathing and the power of breath and breathing. And how in some of the ancient traditions, the drum was played and the drum would travel, across miles and miles and miles and bounce off of the mountain. There's medicine in the rhythm and the drum, and that's your heartbeat. So to begin to reintroduce this natural connection to creativity, this natural connection to singing together, to dancing and celebrating together, and to be able to say now, and you know what? Our scientists and our doctors, they're helping us to recognize that when we move the body, we move the natural chemicals of the body. So to create that power source of information and sharing, and to encourage more schools and more centers. I think that's one of the important contributions that arts institutions can make, is to recognize that what are the foundational things that we have lost that we need to really, really regain. That up against, I'm trying to fly here today. I couldn't download my American Airlines app because I've got like an iPhone 6 or something like that. So, so trying to keep up, I can't keep up with that. So I have to try to keep those traditions alive and introduce those traditions and make that information and those experiences exciting enough so that young people will want to experience it more. And I think a broader commitment to that is one way to begin to introduce and to make sure that there are young people in our audiences to the degree that we can always.
I would also add, when Fred mentions, reclaiming those things that we've lost, I think for us, it's a sense of community. I mean, you look at these big systems, healthcare, education, they're all broken, right? And they're not changing anytime soon. The truth is we need to create it where we are.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people came here thinking that everybody here is a partner in their health, because the truth is that we all experience this mood elevation simultaneously and collectively tonight, right? The people who are around us really do impact our lives, sometimes in immediately identifiable and impactful ways, and sometimes not. I think about during the pandemic, right? Someone, a public health professional, made the decision to use the word social distancing instead of physical distancing. Nobody was asked to socially distance. Are you kidding? As a matter of fact, there's all these new ways that we can now socialize. You were asked to physically distance, right? We were kind of already moving in that direction anyway, even before the pandemic. We had really, again, I'm in primary care. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, social isolation, huge. So we need to create communities again. We need to appreciate that the people who are closest to us, where we live, where we work, where we shop, they have a huge impact on our experience of life and our well-being. And we have a huge impact on theirs. And when we see each other as really critical to each other's lives, maybe that does change. Maybe people start to pay a little more attention to what's going on with the person down the hall or, the kid up the street, or that's something that we can control and we can start today while we can still be hopeful that these broken systems repair themselves.
We've got time for 2 more questions. If you don't mind, we'll go here and then we'll come over to you, sir. So question over here.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion. The title of this is The Art, Science, and Culture of Health. And Misha, you mentioned a couple of research programs that you're working with, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about where the research is, what's being found, and wonder if you're familiar with the NeuroArts program, because the NeuroArts program is a very research-focused program that's looking at what happens to our bodies with art and how that affects us. So where is the research coming from, and how are we going to improve that research so that you can get the results you're looking for?
There's actually a lot of research. The problem is that the research is not necessarily closely linked to the medicine itself. The research is the basic operations, like an fMRI when you're singing. So the research is done more in how does this work? We have to take that next step. The problem is that that next step in the current model of research is millions and millions of dollars for each basic trial. Just to run trial with 50 patients in reality is going to cost you at least $1 million, and there are very few research sponsorships that exist. And at the level of NIH, this translational component is very scarce. JD brought up the new push to research science inside the health. Again, only half of the money there is dedicated toward actual medical outcomes. Most of it is a basic science of understanding. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing this. I'm just saying we're not investing enough in there. And I think that the reason for that has more to do with general perception. We think that these things are fluffy. We think that assessing them is difficult, and I disagree. I actually think that they're not fluffy anymore. We have a lot of research if you carefully synthesize this research appropriately. And the next step should be, okay, well, somebody have to start funding this translational research on the grand scheme of things. If you know somebody who gives money, please send them our way, because that's what we
If
try
I
to
do, I will.
And in terms of the Neuro Arts Initiative, I've been kind of involved from the ground floor with Neuro Arts when it was, introduced at the Aspen Institute. And actually, Tampa, Florida, was today announced to be a Neuro Arts city. I work very closely with
Congratulations.
the Kravitz Center in West Palm Beach, and so we're very much an integral part of, sharing the Neuro Arts information and really spreading that. And many of the arts institutions, that's the foundation, is that research is the foundation of how we move forward together.
So it's not addressing specifically what the research is, but a resource for the neuro arts is Susan McSalmon spoke on our panel back in December. So she's got the Neuro Arts Blueprint, which is a good source. It's a hub where you can go and see what the research is. I'll also take a little plug for our colleague Jill Sonke, who is our Cultural Policy Fellow within the National Academy of Medicine. Hopefully we'll have her here as well, but she is the Director of Research at the Center for Art and Medicine at the University of Florida, former director. So there is a lot of activity. There are hubs where you can find some of that research. And hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that, especially when we get Jill here. So Sarah, if we could end with you.
So one of you mentioned placebo. And I'm assuming that all four of you would agree with me that the placebo effect is massively underrated. And let me illustrate. So when I was in college 100 years ago or so, there was no mental health care, and I was totally stressed out. And every time I got totally stressed out, I would go to the health center, stand in line and get an appointment. And I never got any advice or any medication, but I always felt better when I went back to my dormitory, And I didn't lie. I would say, I'm not sleeping well. I'm waking up, with tremendous pain in my neck. And they would say, well, that's too bad. But I always felt better. And then fast forward 30 years or so, and for 16 years I was a single parent. And so I had a 105-hour work week, work, and homework. And at one point, about maybe 5 to 7 years into this, I was having this huge feeling of pressure in my chest, So I thought, well, I probably ought to go see somebody about this. Maybe I'm having a heart attack or something, I knew I probably wasn't, but so, I went to the health center this was Kaiser at that point, and, test after test and everything, and they told me there's nothing wrong with you. But I felt better. And, I think I probably knew that 75% chance there's nothing wrong with me, but I need to go get some health care because I'll feel better. And the pressure went away. So anyway, that's...
I don't know if there's a question
Was
here,
there a question there? Or
we agree with you.
Well, I guess the question goes back to, I'm assuming that you'll agree with me, and I saw head shaking, that the placebo effect is massively
let me give
underrated and needs to be studied more.
But let me give you one example, which kind of blows me still 20 years later. Years ago, there was a fascinating studies in acupuncture. What they did is they took a sham acupuncture, that's a quote-unquote placebo, a real acupuncture, and they said, okay, so the sham and real acupuncture, the difference was tiny. It was clinically barely significant, it was statistically significant. But then, finally they said, wait a second, but let's look at the general. What was that sham or placebo effect? And it was 3 times better than any medications. And, and if you look at all this research like this, you need to start realizing, well, maybe a huge part of our healthcare system is simply manipulating the placebo effect.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the research, you remove all this. You're trying to get this clean data sets. But again, that works great for airplanes and cars, not for human beings. We're too complex. We have to move on. It's fine to keep placebo research. I'm just fine. But when you're talking about non-toxic things, the voice, the culture, the art, we have to move on from placebo. We have to start doing pragmatic studies, simply looking, what does this do to a particular health outcomes? And I will assure you that we're going to see a lot of really profound benefits. But the model of research is not quite there yet. I think there is attempts at creating, there was this Picori Institute that was created. There's a patient-centered outcome research. The idea was there that there will be less placebo, more real-life studies. It didn't take off enough, in my opinion.
So essentially, placebo is not nothing.
Exactly.
What is it?
Well, can I also...
It's our spirit.
Yes, back to Rumi, right? Maybe not only are you the medicine for you, maybe you're also the medicine for others, right? Maybe we're all our medicine, right? Maybe there's something really powerful and healing in just feeling like you're being seen and heard and cared about, right? Maybe that presence of like kindness and compassion is actually medicinal and free.
And that inner conversation in your voice that guided you to go in and communicate, and you needed that, that was the important thing is, you know what, I honor myself enough, I'm gonna go. You were heard, and you walked away and you felt better. You participated in your own health and well-being by honoring who you are.
Okay, thank you so much for your question.